What's up, everyone? Triple Nipple Nick back on YouTube. Today we're on the Stone Arch Bridge talking about my recent 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. If I had shot this video, probably there were 2 times I could have shot this video that would have both been good. Right after the retreat and right now after having some time to integrate my experience at the retreat. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but one example, if I had shot that video right after the retreat, I might have been talking about some crazy shit. It would have been very raw, very bold of me, but also potentially very helpful to give an inside look into like what actually can happen to someone's mind doing serious, in-depth spiritual work. So now it's been a few weeks, I'm a lot more leveled out, but I might have been saying some shit like, I'm done with the physical world. Like I really have no interest in accomplishing like financial success, doing things I love, traveling in nature, fulfilling my life's purpose, having a cool social life. I would have just been like, all that leads to happiness is direct spiritual experience of the present moment and not reacting in a negative way to that present moment. I'm done with this illusion of the world and I just want to fucking go become a monk. During the retreat, I literally had thoughts of like, wow, this is where it's at. Like, I'm done with this sense of self. I'm going to go become a monk for like 3 years, 10 years, whatever it takes. Like when you're in that retreat for 10 days, it is a powerful experience on the level of a psychedelic trip where your state of consciousness, your belief system is very odd. And now this isn't what we're going to be talking about in the video, but this is just going to give you a little bit of context for where I'm at right now. Now I've had a couple weeks, which has been pretty fucking insane after that retreat. It's been quite the experience, and so I'm going to give you probably a good look into that and not make so much of a fool of myself by being on some delusional spiritual high that's not actually delusional, but it's just so out of touch with the material world and so much more in this spiritual, unmanifest, transpersonal world, which isn't actually delusional, but from the perspective of mainstream society would look pretty out there and pretty crazy. So we're going to talk about Vipassana in general for people who are curious about a 10-day Vipassana retreat, what to expect as far as the technique, the structure, the philosophy, the experience in general. And we're going to talk about my personal experience doing that. And so let's just start off with a little bit of my personal experience, get into the Vipassana, and then get back to my experience in this context. So starting off with my history before getting into this Vipassana retreat. I've been on 2 meditation retreats before when I was 16 and 17 years old because this Vipassana center rejected me because I wasn't 18. And so I was like, well, fuck, I'm just going to go do it myself, which was great. Had an amazing experience with both of those times, lots of growth. However, I would recommend someone start off with the Vipassana retreat. In my meditation retreats, I had a lot of different techniques I was practicing. A very loose structure where I would just meditate for a while, take a break, meditate for a while. There is something about being able to go balls to the wall, super, extremely hard in the meditation retreat, not worrying about cooking, not worrying about time, just focusing 100% of your attention on the meditation technique that really takes you out of your ego, out of your sense of self, to the point where if you stop meditating for a minute, the level of sankaras, the level of suffering and ego-driven thought patterns and fear of death that is coming up will get you to the point where you're like, I need to leave, I need to get out of here, I can't stand a minute of this. And then if you go back into that deep meditative state, you raise your consciousness above that level of suffering. So really going deep into the meditation technique allows you to every minute go into a deeper level of suffering and spiritual purification, compared to my meditation retreats, which were a lot more like I would experience some emotions coming up and I wouldn't maintain that deep level of meditative awareness. And I would kind of just like writhe in that suffering for a couple hours. And honestly, I don't even know if I was processing it or just slightly processing a little bit and then coming back out of it and then bringing it up again. Whereas on this Vipassana retreat, the structure of the retreat is super powerful. And if you're doing this stuff, it's almost like taking a psychedelic and resisting it. You're going to have a worse time if you don't go that hard. Like it sounds like, holy shit, that sounds like a lot of suffering, but really your level of consciousness and the technique they teach you is you go to a new level of consciousness, and that brings out deeper aversions deeper levels of purification, deeper inner resistance that you have to the present moment, and then your level of consciousness raises to transcend that. And so you're not really in that suffering in your ego so much. And it is definitely good to have some experience with meditation. So let's just go on now to Vipassana, what to expect if you're interested in doing Vipassana. Number one, definitely have some level of meditation practice, right? For two reasons, and of course there's other reasons, but these are the two things you need to have. You need to have a baseline level of concentration. Focus on your breath. Every time your mind wanders, bring your attention back to your breath and build that muscle, because if you don't have at least some level of concentration in a meditative practice, you're not going to be able to fully make use of the retreat setting and go super deep into it. Number two, your physical body is going to hurt. Your mind is going to trick you into thinking that your physical body is having a really hard time, even though you're just sitting for an hour at a time and you're totally fine. You will experience a lot of pain. But if you're not sitting for an hour a day, or about that, maybe less, preferably more, your back muscles, your other muscles aren't going to be adapted to the point where they can at least handle meditating 6 to 12 hours a day. And that's another thing. You're meditating 6 hours a day in the hall, usually 6 hours a day in your room. And if you need to, you can lay down, as long as you're not taking a nap. For me, I don't really fall asleep during the day. It's pretty hard for me to fall asleep. And the nice thing about that is I can meditate laying down and stay totally alert. So, concentration and just your physical ability to sit there. For those reasons, you're going to want to have a meditation practice. The technique beyond concentration, you don't really need to learn that. Having the muscle of concentration will allow you to practice Vipassana. And so let's get into why you would want to go on a retreat. You're going to get the full retreat experience instead of dipping your toes in the water and not going balls to the wall hard, like I explained. You're going to have the structure that allows you to focus. The technique is pretty fucking amazing. The technique is really good. It's a really powerful technique. There's a reason these centers are all around the world. Like I said, your level of consciousness is able to raise itself to the level of suffering you are experiencing. That's not something that's easy to do with a meditation technique, especially for a beginner, but it's really well taught. So yeah, those reasons, the technique, the structure, like overall, it's just a good structure. And after that, you can go do your own meditation retreats and do it properly. Also, this is serious, deep spiritual work. This is like doing a deep surgical operation on your mind, is the metaphor they use. You can have really intense stuff come up. You can have very destabilizing stuff where if you were just on your own, it might not be good. It's really good to have that structure there as a safety mechanism if you haven't explored these parts of your mind before, because you have people there and teachers who know how to handle this stuff. If you go a little bit off the rocker, you're gonna be a lot more okay than if you were just out in the middle of the woods on your own. And yeah, so overall, that's a lot of reasons I would recommend this structure. Now let's get into the technique. So concentration in Buddhism is one type of meditation. You're concentrating on an object, a single constant object that you keep bringing your attention back to focus your mind on real, actual experience instead of getting lost in thoughts. Let's just leave it at that. And then insight-based meditation is observing what's already there, not really trying to change or adulterate your experience in any way, to become aware that there is no self, that all of reality is impermanent sensations that are arising and passing away, and that your mental reaction and impression to the sensations is causing suffering through craving, aversion, and the sense of self. And of course, Buddhism often leaves out love. Buddhism says, you become enlightened and you'll become a loving person. Enlightenment's not going to fix your shadow. Check out Ken Wilber's work. And a lot of other spiritual traditions will emphasize love as actually a highest form of truth, as the reason for reality existing beyond just this no self, suffering, and impermanence. So from their perspective, and here's a couple things that I would caution you about the ideology that you're going to experience at these retreats. They're going to have a clear idea of what awakening looks like, of what the spiritual path looks like, both internally and how you present yourself. And they're going to really say this is the best technique. They say some stuff about this is the pure way that the Buddha taught meditation, which I think is a little bit, let's not worry about that. My lips are a bit chapped. It's kind of what you would expect anytime you're going to have a spiritual tradition form in a physical location with a community. That's just how the human mind works. Spiritual development and meditative practice does not correlate, again, with shadow work or intellectual worldview development. So someone can be super ideological and experience spiritual awakening. Those things aren't the same line of development. Again, check out Ken Wilber's work. So go for their structure. Be careful about the ideology. Just practice the technique, and don't sit there on the meditation chair or cushion thinking about, oh, this is how this stuff works, developing an intellectual understanding of what's going on. Everything that you're trying to experience and aim for here is first-person actual intellectual experience, actual experiential understanding, not intellectual. So that's what to expect. Now, again, concentration, insight. Build your concentration. The first 3 days of the meditation retreat, you're going to be building your concentration muscle. You'll see how when you're there. The 7 days after that, you're going to be building, you're going to be using that concentration muscle to practice insight practice by scanning your whole body. You're going to raise your sensitivity to the subtle sensations in your body. And what you might experience by the end of it is it felt like this just like wave of subtle vibrations throughout the body. I could think of an area on my thigh, like a penny-sized area, and feel like 5 different sensations there instantly. Which usually now that I'm not in that state, I think of my thigh, and it's almost just like this blind, amorphous blob. And so one thing, and they don't explain it like this, but one thing that you're doing is you're constantly comparing your mental model of the body. You're thinking, oh, my thigh, and then you're going to the actual sensations. Towards the end of it, I was just going up and down my body, and it was just one giant wave of vibrations. And I didn't have to think like, oh, now I'm moving to my thigh, now I'm moving to my knee. I would just feel through the wave of vibrations. It was one smooth, interconnected wave up and down your body. You're going from head to toe. And every day, from day 3 to 9, you're going to be practicing a little bit more of an advanced technique of Vipassana, which is the body scanning. The more you feel those subtle vibrations, the more sensations you feel, the more, in Buddhism, they call it sankharas. Pretty much any spiritual tradition is going to have this idea of spiritual purification. There's many different ways to think about it. You could think of it like your mind is constantly reacting to the present moment. Oh, I'll be happy when I get this. Oh, that sensation. Oh, I'm cold. I don't like this. I want to feel warm. You're constantly, and I was actually pretty freaked out. I realized during this retreat that holy shit, every moment I'm having like 5 little thoughts, like 5 different mental impressions. The amount of thoughts you're having per moment is incomprehensible until you start to gain an awareness of them. Of just little like, I want this, I don't like this. Resistance, aversion, and craving. And so you're kind of bringing your awareness into the present moment. As you do so, you're going to bring up more aversion and craving. And usually we only feel into those sensations when we're like eating cake, doing some drugs, drinking alcohol. Most people need positive sensations to feel into the present moment. And that's why at a certain part of the retreat, I was like, holy shit, I don't want to engage in the world anymore. All I want to do is focus on my reaction to sensations, because it became so apparent to me that all of suffering and all of happiness is just how much you're resisting the sensations in the present moment. It actually doesn't make any difference what's happening in the external world, just how you're reacting to it. And I'd say now, and what I could be experiencing could very well, and it actually is, but it's okay. So what I'm experiencing now over the past few weeks is an extreme reignition of my passion for the physical world and engaging as my separate individual self in the things I want to do in this world, such as traveling and experiencing nature, having a purposeful career doing things that I love, and that's spreading positive things, stuff along those lines. And I'm just like so excited about all that, in a super high vibration state where I have less limiting beliefs. I'm just like, my inner reality is much more expanded, and I'm just rushing to get my outer reality to meet that inner reality with no resistance, which is something that's a pretty deep experience, compared to the years I've been doing personal development, entrepreneurship, health, and stuff like that. It's pretty amazing. If you're familiar with reality transurfing, I'm really implementing a lot of those things. So that's from one perspective, from the perspective of the ego, of the self. That's going to help me get the things I want, right? However, from the deepest, most metaphysical, absolute perspective, this is just my ego freaking out, doing whatever it takes to resist death. In a sense, in Buddhism or any kind of similar spiritual practice, pretty much any tradition practice in the esoteric form, not the exoteric belief system form, what you're doing is essentially spiritual suicide. One thing in early Buddhism is this idea of nirvana, this cessation. We need to escape this world. And then later forms of Buddhism, later turnings, come back and say, actually, the highest stage of awakening is to go to that cessation and then reintegrate it into the physical world. The 10th Zen ox herding picture is the monk coming back to the village. So that's one perspective in Buddhism, is that you need to renounce the world, go spend 30 years in a cave, and then you can come back to the world without a sense of an individual separate self. And then you can interact with the world as a bodhisattva with the intention of liberating everyone else from their suffering. And this is one perspective that I find a little bit extreme, because in a sense it's assuming that there's a mistake for you being here, that you being here right now experiencing suffering is something bad that we need to avoid. And of course that's a paradox that resolves itself. In Advaita Vedanta they say you're already enlightened. That's something that the ego takes on to transcend itself. And it's not like the ego actually is capable of enjoying the present moment completely and not thinking of where it wants to go. That's only something that can happen once the ego is transcended. However, it is still kind of neurotic that the ego structure is trying to kill itself to avoid suffering. In a sense, there is no reason to be awakened, to experience spiritual enlightenment. I think it's a very small percentage of the population that really is ready to let go of their ego fully. Once you even get close, like that was 10 days. For someone to go meditate for 9 months and not have their ego be like, whoa, this isn't good, I'm dying, let's go back. And keep in mind, you are actually dying. You might not have a sense of what that means, but there is no difference between ego death from spiritual practice and physical death, because the physical body and the physical world are an illusion. Ego death is just death, and physical death might not even be death, who knows. Time is illusion anyway. Physical death is something that happens in the future. So it's not even real. Ego death is the only thing that's real. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like it's kind of this paradox where my ego is like, whoa, I'm not ready for that. And my ego knows that this is just some defense mechanism to not experiencing spiritual enlightenment. But at the same time, it's like, whoa, but my ego is so much healthier from this experience, which is a really interesting thing. That like in this tradition of Vipassana, under the Goenka tradition, they actually don't really emphasize doing this for spiritual awakening. They just say it's something that's going to help everyone, and there's a few extreme people who are going to use it for spiritual awakening. So while my ego is having this reaction of really trying to resist ego death, it's been very positive for me. And I've just been vibrating. If you're familiar with levels of energy, I've been like consistently vibrating above 500, above 400, and pretty much never below 200 since then. And if you're familiar with that, above 200, you're past the threshold where there's more of an upward spiral. And so if you're having no energy below 200, you're going to be in this really upward spiral state vibrationally. And beyond all that, the highest levels are enlightenment. So it's kind of this idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's been traditions in Eastern mysticism for thousands of years where people go at a very young age and just go straight for spiritual enlightenment. And there's other traditions, some in the Western history, where you start off going through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and through that process, through that alchemy of the soul, eventually, kind of like the hero's journey, you get the Holy Grail, you get what you want, and then it's not the thing that makes you happy, but the process of self-transformation that gets you there. And I think that that's still on the relative world, but there is something to be said about realizing experientially what's not going to make you happy at the deepest level, and then going for enlightenment. So, I mean, just being in the process of high vibration energy that I'm in feels amazing, and I'm not doing it with the idea of like, oh, once I get here, then I'll be happy. That's one thing that I've really taken from the retreat. After facing these extreme levels of suffering, I can basically push myself to do any kind of work that I need to do, and just feel completely at ease in a high vibrational energy of doing that work, completely in process-oriented thinking, compared to doing it for the result and not feeling good doing the thing, hoping that once I get the fruit of that, I'll feel good, which is a huge trap. That's what the ego is constantly doing. So we've talked about what you need to know about my personal experience before Vipassana, what you should expect to experience at Vipassana if you choose to do it, how to prepare, and what my experience has been in this specific meditation retreat. But really, I've just told you about what I've experienced after the meditation retreat. Let me tell you a little bit more about what it was like while I was actually there. So, because of my history with meditation, I was able to have a base level of concentration that allowed me to go deeper into the technique once I got there. And I did decide when I was doing it to try as hard as I could. Every second that I was eating, as I was falling asleep, as I was taking a shit, as I was brushing my teeth, I was meditating. I didn't take a second off. I would not think about eating. I would just be like, okay, let me get some food and just like do as little as possible and just focus on the meditation technique. I was surprised they didn't really tell you to do that. So someone who was new there, which a lot of people were, wouldn't have done that. And then around like day 7, they tell you how important it is to do that. And they tell you to just keep awareness of a sensation in your body during that. Meanwhile, while I was going about, I was trying to scan my body because I just was doing what the technique was the whole time. And that was a little bit hard. Sometimes I wouldn't remember which part of my body I was on. So if you go, just try and keep an awareness of the breath or something the whole time. And then while you're sitting to meditate, you can do awareness of the whole body. So I go in there, I'm super concentrated. I'm really building my concentration muscle. One thing that I kind of think in the back of my head is that concentration is a muscle. After a couple hours of concentrating, that muscle is exhausted. It needs to rest until tomorrow. This type of concentration isn't really something the mind is doing. Every sensation is self-aware, self-conscious, and selfless, as in it is not the self that is watching it. This type of concentration is something that builds and builds and builds and doesn't go up and down. The more you concentrate on the breath, if you just sit there for 10 days concentrating on the breath, you're going to get more and more and more concentrated. It's just going to go up and up. It doesn't really need recovery. So my concentration went up and up. Then we get to the Vipassana. But before we start even practicing Vipassana on day 3, and if you've watched this point in the video, you get to hear this because this is something that could sound pretty crazy to someone who doesn't understand the context. So day 3 in the retreat, I'm walking around. We have a little walking trail and focusing on my breath. And then I realize over the past 3 days, I've been meditating, but I haven't felt any feelings of gratitude, which is something I practice daily. It's just been all this suffering coming up, and then I'm observing it, which is okay. You're not going here to feel good. You're going here to deal with your resistance to the present moment, which is often appears very dark from the perspective of the ego. But then for like 5 seconds, I'm like, well, let me just see what happens if I practice gratitude. So I look around. It's a really beautiful forest valley below me. And just for 5 seconds, I'm like, wow, this is really nice. Like, look at, like, set everything aside about my whole story of my separate self. Right now, there is just this experience of a beautiful forest. And I was so out of my ego, out of my sense of self, that I wasn't like looking at something as like, oh, what a nice thing I'm observing. It was just like focus on the raw sensations in the body. And so you're not supposed to do this. The teacher actually yelled at me later when I told him that I did that. But it really wasn't clear. They tell you not to practice other techniques. I thought 5 seconds of gratitude wasn't a meditation technique, and I thought it would just be chill. But apparently it's against the rules to do that. They want you to strictly practice their technique. I don't know if it was really a bad thing. So here's what happened. I feel this deep feeling of gratitude. If you're familiar with levels of energy, it came out probably at about 500, 510, 520. And I was just like, whoa, for like 5-10 minutes. Then that feeling fades away. And none of this is intentional past the first 5 seconds. It just takes on this momentum of its own. Like I said, anything above 200 is going to create more of itself. A lot of the 500s is not someplace that anyone really resides in, the higher 500s that is, because it's so close to the border of enlightenment and the separate self. So this energy starts coming in at about 520, and if you don't need to know this model, you can look it up, pull it up as a reference right now, which is somewhere around there. I don't even remember the order, like 510, 520, 530 is like peace, love, gratitude, joy, which doesn't sound like a super deep emotion or like a super high level, like something you would consider to be next to enlightenment vibrationally. But really, when we say peace, love, joy, gratitude, we're talking about actual, like if you're actually residing in pure gratitude, that's not the same as like the typical human experience of walking around every moment you have 5 things that you don't like about the present moment. If you're actually vibrating at the level of gratitude, there's no suffering. There's very subtle levels of suffering and separation. It's just like this deep feeling of joy, something that I used to never experience. And something that in the book Levels of Energy, they say a lot of people only experience when they're falling in love with someone. They'll get a brief glimpse of that vibrational level. But that's something that I've experienced a bit over the past, let's say 5 months, 4 months, just from spiritual practice. And a lot of from practicing gratitude, I'll just like get just a little glimpses of that level, which is really incredible. Just one experience of that is completely life-changing. So when I say like these levels are peace, joy, love, gratitude, like people say, oh, I experience joy every day, but this is like pure joy. And let's get back to it. So I experienced this like this peace, love, gratitude, joy in whatever order it comes to me. And then I'm like, whoa, that was awesome. Wow, what an amazing experience. And then I just sit there and then I start to like be like, oh, I want to get back to that. But then I go back to the feelings in my body and I stop resisting and craving. I just go back to the Vipassana technique. And then I'm just like, this isn't the technique, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, wow, that was awesome. I'm glad I experienced that. And then it comes back more at like this like higher level, probably like 540. And if you pull up the chart, I can't even remember what the labels are for that, but then it keeps cycling. Basically, I go into it, I come out of it, and I start to have the pattern of being like, oh, I want to go back to that. I let go of that resistance, and I experience like this kind of like, still, this isn't Vipassana. This is just like something that's happening in the back of my head as I'm practicing. This gratitude for that experience, and then it just brings on a deeper level of that experience, and it kind of goes up to 540, 560. Every time it comes back, it starts as this just deep feeling of love. And then it comes back even stronger. And for about 5 or 10 minutes at the end, it just completely breaks down my sense of self. And instead of kind of being in the body, it just rushes from my heart area, up through the body, down through the body, out. And it's like, instead of being this energy, this energetic experience, and it's not energy, but like, that's kind of how it manifests. Instead of being in the body, and kind of contained, it just explodes completely uncontained, just everywhere. And it just breaks down my sense of self, my sense of individual body, and I'm looking around me, and there's no sense of an observer, there's no sense of an observed. I'm just seeing the trees, and it doesn't, this isn't an intellectual thing, this is direct experience, that what I'm looking at is absolutely perfect. In that moment, it became completely clear to me for a few minutes that every sensation is completely perfect. Basically, I was experiencing sensations without any craving or aversion, mental impressions to those sensations, just focused in on that yet that sensation is aware of itself, self-conscious. Consciousness is within the experience and sensation. Just raw sensation-based reality. And actual raw sensations, without the lens of the separate self, will give you the deepest experience of love, peace, and joy. But even beyond those levels that are experienced by the separate self, just self-aware. And so at this level, myself is like, for a few minutes, I wasn't really there. I thought my name, Nick, popped into my head, and I was completely clear that I was just another sensation, like the cloud floating by. But then as I was going into that experience, as I was coming out of that experience, myself that was there for most of that experience was so grateful for that experience. So I'm rolling around. I'm like, laughing, screaming, crying for like an hour on end outside. And so in Buddhism, they kind of have this idea of just the Buddha sitting there in equanimity and tranquility, and not having these reactions. But it's totally reasonable that after the ego leaving for a moment and the reality having this experience of itself unadulterated, the ego is going to freak out. Like, you think, oh, you have a glimpse of enlightenment, and the ego comes back and it's just like, oh, I wonder what just happened. And it's like, that was interesting, but I'm meditating. Let me not think about that. So like the intensity of the experience completely overwhelmed my ability to sit there and just focus on the sensations and meditate. I'm like, I lose all desire to practice Vipassana. I'm just in complete bliss. So then I talk to the teacher. He's like, what happened? I tell him what happened. And he's like, I know you were practicing another technique, which was kind of right. But then he just dismissed that as impurities coming out. Which is something that I kind of disagree with Buddhism. It's this really kind of stoic, almost like religious idea that you're just like arising and passing away. Until I get to complete enlightenment, I'm going to sit there and not engage with any experience, which actually is what's going to get you to full enlightenment the fastest. But that's just not what I was there. Like, I was just going to enjoy that experience. So yeah, they warned me. They say, hey, don't practice any other techniques. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I won't practice any other techniques. And from then on, I don't. Because honestly, it is a super powerful technique. The fact that I was able to just focus on gratitude for 5 seconds, and combined with the awareness and level of consciousness I was at, it spiraled into that crazy experience. I can see how dangerous it would be to like do some Kundalini energy work on this retreat. To do any other technique, you can like, your consciousness is so malleable, so high, that any kind of technique could be super dangerous. And that's what they tell you. They tell you it's going to be dangerous if you do something else with it. Totally reasonable. Totally get that. So, experienced that on the third day. From day 4 to 10, I'm just experiencing these crazy levels of suffering like I experienced earlier, where if I would stop meditating for a minute, it would feel horrible. I'd be like, I need to leave. This is the most unpleasant, horrible thing I've ever experienced. And then I would go back into the technique and I'd be like, oh, or I wouldn't be like, oh, I would just observe it. So since then, every time, so I've been going a lot. I've been still meditating, and oftentimes I don't really need to meditate. I just drop into this extreme meditative state, something I would have very rarely experienced before, just while I'm walking around. Doing a lot of do-nothing meditation, self-inquiry, Kriya yoga. So in a moment, I'll talk about their ideology about practicing their one best technique. But I'll say that as I go about and do these things, I have some of the bodily sensations come up that I would typically in the past associate with like a deep level of depression and unpleasantness. But when you actually feel into those sensations, what you're going to experience is that your body and mind are just calling for rest. So if I go all day, I'm doing all these high vibrational work activities, just like in love with life, wanting to do things I enjoy, then my body and mind kind of needs some rest. That's kind of why people get depressed and kill themselves, is because their deeper self is tired of playing this character, tired of all this suffering that they're creating by resisting the present moment. So when you're depressed, and this is something I learned from Jeff Foster many years ago, your body is calling for deep rest. Your mind is calling for a deep rest. It just needs a break. It wants you to just sit out there, chill for a second, and actually do nothing. The problem is that people don't do that. They go scroll on TikTok. They go and constantly resist those sensations. But really, those unpleasant sensations are calling for you to transcend the aversion and craving that you're constantly projecting onto your phenomenological actual experience, not of reality, but which is your reality, which is the reality. So that's one thing that I've experienced. I feel like my experience of life has been very distinct before and after this retreat. It is some serious deep work. Like I explained earlier, you're processing so much because of how powerful the technique is at raising your consciousness. And that's one thing. It's just that a lot of sensations in my body that used to affect me negatively, it's just nothing. And honestly, part of it is also just that the level of suffering I experienced on that retreat is 100 times anything I've ever experienced before, just in day-to-day life. So a little bit of heaviness in my chest, I'm just like, oh, my higher self is calling for rest. I just go sit there, allow it to be, say, this is also something I learned from Jeff Foster, say to that emotional experience, you can be here as long as you want. In order to really transcend the suffering associated with an emotion, say like a heaviness that you feel in your chest, you have to be okay with having that feeling be there forever. If you're like, oh, you can be here now so that I can process you and move on and not experience you anymore, that's not it. And so this technique will really teach you to be okay with those sensations forever. And you will realize that those sensations are not causing suffering. It's your mental reaction to them that's causing the suffering. Right? So now let's move on to the ideology about not practicing other techniques. Within the context of the meditation retreat, it's respectful. They're providing all this for you. Just do their technique. It's actually dangerous on a meditation retreat to mix in all these other techniques. Just do their technique. When I talked to the teacher, he told me, if you like this technique, if you're benefiting from it, try it for a year. If it's working, stick with that technique until you attain full Buddhahood, full enlightenment. If it's not working, try another technique. I asked him, and self-inquiry, Ramana Maharshi, is pretty well known. I was like, oh, what about self-inquiry? Because he would say, as you scan the body, notice the no self of all those sensations, right? That's exactly what I do when I do self-inquiry. And he didn't know what self-inquiry was. So it's very, in their Buddhist sect, in their Vipassana sect, this is the pure teaching of the Buddha. Ramana Maharshi, Kriya Yoga with Lahiri Mahasaya and Yogananda. Nah, this is the best technique. It's very religious. I'm a big fan of Frank Yane. Frank Yane is amazing. I learned about Vipassana mostly from him. He advocates mixing techniques. So I think it can be dangerous potentially, but in my day-to-day life since this technique, I've been mixing techniques, and I'll tell you from my perspective, which is pretty much also Frank Yane's perspective, why Vipassana mixes well with do nothing, and then I'll cover why Vipassana mixes well with Kriya Yoga, which is just my perspective. So the way Frank Yane explains Vipassana versus do nothing is that Vipassana is creating a sense of an observer because you're observing the body and disintegrating the body with the observer. It's similar. It's actually, like I said, it's just like self-inquiry. You're using your concentration to dissolve the sense of the body by looking at the actuality and realizing that the body is a mental impression and construct in the actual raw phenomenological experience, there is no body. The downside of this technique, the reason people can practice Vipassana meditation for decades and not get enlightened, is because they're solidifying a sense of the observer. So they might dissolve the sense of the body, but then they're residing as this witnessing consciousness. And witnessing consciousness is not the highest level of enlightenment. It's still a separate self. You're creating this very subtle duality. Do nothing meditation, and then Shinzon Yun will actually explain that do nothing meditation kind of relies on the muscle of meditation that's already active from previous practice. You don't want to jump into do nothing meditation, although you can, it works for some people. Do nothing meditation is every time you notice that the mind is doing something, stop doing that thing. And notice that this doesn't mean the mind is constantly scanning for what it's doing and then dropping that. It's every time that you happen to notice that the mind is doing something, drop it. And the mind's going to do that on its own without you doing something. So let me practice do nothing for a second. I just started paying attention. Oh, and what am I doing right now? Drop that. Basically, okay, I gotta be careful because I'm at the point where if I can practice do nothing meditation for just a little bit and just joint the fuck out. I won't even be able to take this video anymore. I'll just be sitting here like in some like disillusioned state where I don't feel real and reality doesn't feel real and there's just a flow of consciousness. So we're gonna be careful here, but it's like a dog, and I learned this from Leo Gura. It's like a dog, I don't know where he got it, a dog clenching a tennis ball. You say drop it, and the dog just drops the ball, right? So it's just this muscle of dropping the ball. It's like, am I meditating? Am I doing nothing? Do I notice I'm doing anything? And you're just constantly using this muscle of drop the ball. And it's like, okay, what should I drop now? Oh, and you're dropping things. You're not just dropping the fact that you're trying to drop things. You're dropping that when you notice that's happening. You're also dropping whatever it is your mind is doing. So your mind might start to think about, oh, I got to file my taxes before April. I should probably get organized now. Oh, drop that. Oh, I should drop that. Oh, I'm trying to, you're not just focusing on this recursive loop of dropping. You're dropping everything, but then you're just not getting too, it's a balance, right? You can't practice this technique perfectly. But after doing it, you will get into this flow where you just start to feel like the body and the mind are running themselves. And so this is a really nice one to practice while you're walking around, while you're recording a YouTube video. And while you are doing nothing, the body and the mind can kind of just do things on their own. So this is kind of gonna, Frank Yane explains that this is the opposite of Vipassana, and doing both will help take you to the next level. And any meditation technique has its opposite that it's creating. This is not something just with Vipassana. Every meditation technique inherently is creating more dualities because you're already enlightened, because there is nothing to do, because there is no self to become enlightened. Every meditation technique is something the ego picks up to practice. So, yeah, you can go and apply that understanding to every meditation technique, and go watch Frank Yane's videos on Vipassana, his one on Do Nothing meditation. The title is How to Be in a Flow State 24/7. That's an amazing video. His meditation techniques are just a vibrational download that will, if you treat it like a guided meditation, will really raise your state of consciousness. One thing I'll talk about here now is Kriya Yoga. Vipassana meditation is going to increase your awareness of the sensations in the body. Kriya Yoga is feeling into the chakra energy centers, but to do that, just feel into the sensations in your body, and that'll give you a lot of the body awareness you need to get there. So I have noticed that since doing Vipassana, my ability to do Kriya Yoga has been supercharged. Like just absolutely insane. I could go on for that for a while, but we're getting pretty long here, so I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, I'm just going to empty my mind and think if there's any final thoughts that someone who is interested in this 10-day Vipassana retreat would want to hear. Be careful of doing this because you have shadow material, you have deep psychological suffering that you want to work on. Spiritual bypassing is a very real thing that happens when you have a deep level of suffering related to some psychological thing going on. And it's interesting because Vipassana at the same time, like I said, if you have deep feelings of depression, can help you totally transcend and build a new relationship to those. But what makes the difference is if your feelings of depression are coming from a spiritual source or a psychological shadow source. And like I said earlier, doing spiritual work isn't going to integrate your shadow. So if you have BPD, NPD, if you have severe trauma, be very careful trying to use Vipassana to work on that. Go to a therapist first. At least get to a certain level of psychological release and development. And then after that, maybe Vipassana would be great for you. But these meditation centers are going to ask you, do you have any serious mental illnesses? There was a guy there who had bipolar type 1. And I don't know, it might have ended up being good for him. But he ended up having a full-blown episode during the retreat. Now, this is a tricky thing where the modern psychological institutions are very corrupt. You might be aware of this. Obviously, pharmaceuticals, psychiatry is very backwards, has a lot of materialistic scientific paradigms that very much limit taking a holistic approach that gets to the root of those issues. Yet, at the same time, taking a direct spiritual approach oftentimes isn't the most deep approach to those issues. However, it is possible that even with deep things like schizophrenia, bipolar type 1, meditation could get to the bottom of those. Because bipolar type 1, for example, what are you doing in mania? You're chasing positive sensations. What are you doing in depression? And this is like I was explaining earlier, you're having these deep negative sensations. And I used to get depressed. I used to get pretty fucking depressed for weeks on end because I would feel these sensations and I would freak the fuck out, right? So I would just start to resist them. And because I've been able to fully embrace those now, they last like 5 minutes at most. And then I'm back to like, let's fucking go. I almost appear hypomanic. Go read the book, The Hypomanic Edge, if you want to understand why there's a fine line between mania in an unhealthy form versus just riding this wave of high vibrational energy that actually doesn't have a downside reaction to it. So, yeah, but that's only because I'm actually okay with that depressive feeling, because I can go and meditate and experience deep peace, gratitude and not gratitude, but deep peace, equanimity and acceptance, and just rest in that sensation and just be at peace, just rest in that. So yeah, that's why I would just say be very cautious with these deep mental disorders, because the modern psychological institution can do you very dirty, but also these very deep techniques sometimes aren't the best fit, especially for things like schizophrenia and cluster B personality disorders. You want to be very careful to not use this to go deeper into it, and trauma. And even bipolar, I don't have bipolar type 1. I don't know what that's like. I've just experienced some depression. I don't know if it really helped that guy or not. I talked to him after the retreat, and I don't know how it helped. I don't know if it helped with his bipolar. I don't know, right? So be careful. This is a warning. This is getting long, so I'm going to see if there's anything else I would say about this topic before we wrap it up. Nature is a powerful spiritual catalyst. I would say that Vipassana is almost one of the deepest level of spiritual techniques. Like, Do this if you're really interested in absolute truth, the deepest levels of spiritual work. If you just want to have like more high vibrational energy, more of a connection to nature, more gratitude, if you just want to do personal development, be more present, live the type of external life that you want to live, and have a bit more appreciation for it, maybe don't go into this. But at the same time, if you're able to go into this will give you all that stuff more than anything else. But they tell you in the videos there. I'll tell you one more thing about the videos too, and we'll wrap it up. They'll tell you a story about this guy who came to the Buddha, or maybe he came to Goenka, the guy who runs the retreat. He came to one of the teachers and he was like, oh yeah, this was actually Goenka himself coming to Vipassana. He was like a guy, he had a bunch of migraines, and he was like, oh, I heard this will cure my migraines. Because his migraines were caused by all these neurotic patterns. He'd been to every doctor. It was a deeper ailment than a physical one. And the teacher said to him, yeah, this might help with your migraines, but I won't allow you to come to this retreat unless you're here for the deepest spiritual work, which has to come from a love of truth, a love of reality, and understanding and experience of reality, regardless of how it affects yourself. Which is, I don't know how to really phrase it, but it has to be coming from, like, feel into your soul and your heart. Is this coming from my highest self? Am I here to do the deepest spiritual work? Or am I just here because it's going to help me with my relationship issues? And it's okay to have both, because it's fucking awesome how much shit this will help you with, right? Now let's talk about one last thing and we'll wrap it up so we don't get to a fucking hour-long YouTube video. They're playing videos every night. We talked about the ideology you'll experience. Listen to the videos, maintain your meditative state of awareness, and apply the techniques from the videos and the general lessons. It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. You can just throw out the ideology, or you can adopt it if that's what you like. But yeah, Triple Nipple Nick here to explain my experience with the 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. I hope this was helpful to you. Leave down in the comments below what your experience has been, if you've done any of these or anything like that. And yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here. Out here on the Stone Arch Bridge. Had a fun time shooting this video. Just kind of probably talked about everything there is to say. Although I actually could go on for 2 more hours if I wanted to. But if I do end up doing that, it's going to be because you go down in the comments below and you say, here's what I want to hear about next. And then I'll do that. All right. Peace. Much love. And yeah, where you are right now is absolutely perfect. Whatever you're suffering you're experiencing is absolutely perfect. Whenever you're experiencing suffering, look for the suffering. Feel into the actual experience of the suffering. You're never going to find it. You're never going to find it. It's not even actually there.